Thank you for responding. Declare the meeting open. I have two apologies, one from Murray Palmer and Bruce Duncan. Would someone move appropriately? Seconder. Thank you. I'll put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. I have no declarations of interest. Would someone, I presume we've all read the papers, confirm the non-confidential minutes? Secondly, thank you. I'll put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Are there any matters arising? If not, we go to the action sheet. Any concerns there? If not, let's move on. Page 12. Oh, the government's work plan. I haven't done that, have I? Yes. Yep. That's done. Governance work plan, any issues there?
I'm noting on page 13, the background, because regional transport, the land transport plans, etc., are such a intense interest of our whole region community-wise, it's noted that it's undertaken annually. And I just wanted to know if it actually this is a space that needs a little bit more closer monitoring and maybe 6 monthly. But is that just based on resource in the sense of it all? So just the annual, just monitoring of the plan. What am I asking? He's going, yeah, what are you asking? Okay, I'm just wondering in respect to monitoring in this report, when you're looking at this plan annually, is there space maybe for a 6 monthly? Or is that just too hard basket? Don't need to do it, Meredith. What are you on about? I'm not sure who I'm looking at to answer that question. I saw your face, that's all. So is it just set as an annual?
Through the chair, we have our annual reports, which are our end of financials, which go against the annual targets that we have in the annual plan. So we report against our progress against those quarterly as part of the activity reporting that comes through.
Supplementary, so I don't sound like, yeah, I get that. I was asked to ask that because of the, as I said, the infrastructure this is, some people think maybe we need to reconsider. That's all I was asking on behalf of. Kia ora, thank you for your answer.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is our annual report on progress against the Regional Land Transport Plan. We've already had a couple of questions on this. So the RLTP, the Regional Land Transport Plan, sets out how often we will report, and currently it does state annually. And as Mr. Wilson mentioned, a lot of the matters that we report on do rely on sort of end of financial year information being available. So it's really a snapshot of where we are at. And when we develop our new RLTP, if there are indicators that need changing, improving, then is the time to look at that.
Any further questions? Yes, Councillor.
Yes, on page 13, number 8, where it's got Armenia Parade Winery Road. Yeah, page 8, page 13, number 8, where it's got upgrade to Winery Road, Horini Street intersections on the whole while heavy vehicle routes are being considered. I've been on this for a bit. How long is it going to take before the heavy vehicle routes have been considered and out for public consultation and so forth?
So through you, Chair, that is imminent. We're just in the process of engaging some external expertise to help us with that process. And then once that on board is in place, we can come back with some firm timeframes. But it is imminent, so consultation likely to be next year.
Through the chair, Dave, I'd like to ask, I see Kings Road again and Harper Road are on. What's the time lag for that? Is there a business, are they waiting on a business case, or where's the progress in this area, please?
Yeah, just to answer that one, that Kings Road, Harpers Road, that's the final business case that we haven't engaged consultants yet at the moment. And so we're almost in the throes that we should be engaging them within the next 2 weeks. We've got a couple of offers that have come through. And some of that we were kind of waiting for heavy freight routes, but we've decided we need to keep that one going, getting its own momentum. So within 2 weeks, we'll be engaging consultants with that.
Okay, and supplementary to that, the parking situation here, I thought we had a contractor that was going to work on parking on the other side of the road in Kings Road.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, it's a separate question. That's part of the minor improvements for the school program that Di further reporters will talk about. Now, the delivery of that, yeah, we also, the contractor, I think he's spoken to as well, he's talking with the landowner.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Still problems there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the report in regards to updating us, etc. I mean, I guess it's all in front of us there, but do you foresee any concerns, any other risks? I see a couple there, but in the space of these feasibility costings in any of these projects, or will they just all enhance business as usual, plodding along nicely? Dave?
Well, each one's specific, and we were just talking about the East Cape Road, and there's so much happening in that area, and so we've got to be quite specific that the business case is only for the East Cape Road. It's not for Hicks Bay, or it's not for the sealing of the road. It's specifically just for that resilience, and that's why we're going to have an introductory session as we spoke at the East Cape Blessing with that community to say what is a business case, and then what the outcomes are, and then once we've done that, then we'll bring the team in to do our full, we call it investment logic mapping exercise. So we thought we'd just do a quick, just 101 on what a business case is, because we just want to get the expectations, because as you're saying, people might get confused. We've got township upgrades, we've got so much happening in that area, we've just got to be quite specific what the scope of this project is. And that'll happen with Tinaroti too. Once we've got this East Cape Road business case resolved, the consultation with that one will be quite specific.
I just wanted to ask about the bridge strengthening to improve district-wide freight efficiency, which is referred to on the front. One assumes then it's also referred to in item 6. And that tells us that in February 19, we set a contract for a professional services panel. But it sounds to me, if I read this, that we're still working on the business case for those number of bridges. So my questions are, A, how many bridges? B, when are we going to be starting to strengthen it?
I suppose we go back, we've engaged Opus to do the business case, and they're starting that analysis, it's Opus and Apple are working in collaboration to do the business case. And so that, the first draft of the business case, we're expecting that to come within the next, by the end of October, which is, it's going to be probably the first draft we'll get, because there's a lot of background data that we've had over the last 6-7 years. So we don't have to, I think, materials before the ocean, we don't have to do a lot of rework, there's a lot of stuff there. But one thing we have noticed is forestry demands, and they do change, they go up and down. But we also have information from the operators who actually apply for heavy weight permits. Some of that data that we're going to do is overlay it to see this is where projections are, this is actually where the operators are actually traveling. And so we need to overlay that stuff. And then we can go put on a map, and it will be quite simple. X, Y, Z. So that business case is done.
Can I ask again for clarity, Mr. Chairman? How many bridges is that related to? And the point I make is that we let the contract for that assets and infrastructure engineering professional services panel on the 14th of February 2019, nearly a year ago, or at least 9 months, 6 or 7 months ago. And we're only just getting on with the business case. We tend to take so long to do anything.
Just to clarify that business case actually allowed us to go direct engagement to 4 or 5 consultants. Our financial year only started in July, so we couldn't actually engage before the financial year started. So there's 2 different things: engaging the consultants, which we're allowed to do, which was that contract, and physically engaging the consultants started in July when our new financial year started. So we're actually on task.
Thank you. That might be made clearer in the report. How many bridges are we proposing to strengthen?
Well, I think we have to wait for the business case, because I don't want to give numbers. We have to let the business case run, because once we see the pattern, it may be more than 9, but I don't want to. Let's see it. Let's see it. It may be more.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard, I see that on 18, 19, 20, you're talking about road security in East Cape Road. Was not there an approval for a certain section of that road to be sealed already? Hasn't that already occurred, or is that subject to a business case? Because I'm wondering why are we waiting for a business case when we've already had money allocated for that road?
Yeah, and that's where we have to be. I was talking before how we communicate this business case. This is for the resilience of the East Cape Road in itself. The sealing of it was a separate PGF project. So this year we've got $50,000 for the design of that. But they come from different funding streams, but the East Cape Road resilience package is a separate piece of work, and it's to go along that route to see how we can make it resilient.
Supplementary, Mr. Chairman. So I've still got to get my head around this, because we were talking about so many kilometres allocated of seal allocated for that road. Are we still talking within that parameter?
No, they're 2 separate things. The ITPP, that was the business case that allowed us to get the Provincial Growth Fund funding, and that's what's funding, because it's 100%, that's what's funding the sealing of East Cape Road. The business case for this one is how do we actually make that road resilient, because there's a lot of, it's been undermined by the ocean, and then we have to talk what's the long-term future of that road itself. And that's the same with Tinaroti, they're quite specific.
So was not there already money in that PGF fund for resilience? Because haven't we started working on the bluff and all that with regard to money?
There's that, yeah. The blessing we had was another portion of funding. That was an emergency works funding because what happened, the road was impacted by storm events. So we're using that money to fix that up. And that's why we were saying, when we talk to the community, there's so much happening in that area that we have to confine what this business case is about. Just that piece of road and how we can make it resilient, or what the stakeholders perceive what the future of that road should be.
So just for clarity, the ceiling of the road, does that still contained within what was originally set aside at, say, 1.6 kilometres?
Yes, that's right. And there's a value to that too, 1.5
Yeah,
$5 million.
whatever it
But we're going to take an opportunity to talk with the stakeholders as well, because there was discussions as should we be sealing around some of the vulnerable spots? And that's what the community have said to us, until those vulnerable spots are resolved first.
Thank you.
They will answer these questions because assets and infrastructure. He said they were putting that on hold until they get the whole thing sorted out. So it's appropriate that he answer this question.
So through the chair, if I can just further clarify, this is obviously a road close to my heart and close to Ms. Korhiri's as well. So for the East Cape Road, there's a range of different things that need to happen there. The first is we have some subsidence and dropouts that have happened right at the 17, 18 kilometre mark. And then we have some other issues, which we're dealing with right now. Then we have some other issues where the road's been washed out that we need to deal with to keep that road open. As Councillor Thompson said, there was money set aside in the Provincial Growth Fund to join up the two sealed sections that are there of about 1.6 kilometres, which we had money set aside to be able to do. So that's a separate portion of work. What we've agreed to do is, looking at the work program that we have in front of us, was to hold that and push that PGF, that ceiling out, until we further understood the amount of work that needs to be done to make that road more resilient going forward. So as Dave said, we've got a business case being developed up to look at the whole stretch of that road, because we know it's a very vulnerable road. It's got the cliffs on one side and it's got the sea on the other, and the two keep trying to meet each other. So part of the work that's been done over that whole stretch of road is to look at how we make it more resilient, knowing that on the outcome of that business case, we may end up having to invest more money into East Cape Road. And if we do, it would make sense to do the sealing of that section at the same time as we do some of the other resilience works coming forward. The two might align. Given the isolation of that road, the cost of doing any work up there, you want to have as much of economy of scale as you can when it comes to that road. So as Dave said, there's three very different projects running across that piece of road, but we're just trying to make sure that they all align so we can get the best return on it going forward.
Given the issue of problems with the East Cape Road, will we succeed in the next term of completing all the work that, in that terms of that allocation that we've made towards East Cape Road? Given the business cases, the feasibility studies, and some of the problems related to that road.
So through you, Chair, there's the money set aside to do the sealing, absolutely. There's some resilient work. Any other work is contingent on a business case showing that it's worth the investment and what is the right investment for that road as well. So while the business case may show that what investment is needed in that road, we would still have to prioritise that investment across the rest of our RLTP, and then also for the National Land Transport Funds as well. So there's still, once the business case says what it says, we then have to look to see what the funding is to go with that. A business case doesn't mean that we have the money straight away. We still have to look at across the other priorities that we have.
And supplementary to that, can you give me an assurance we won't lose that funding for the East Cape Road?
The 3U Chair, no, the 1.6 million that we have is very much set aside for us to deliver that ceiling.
Thank you. Councillor Seymour.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, supplementary to all of that explanation, before Councillor Burdett's explanation, does that mean the blessing of the road, or the section of the road last week, is not preparatory to some work happening immediately? Am I hearing that the work is all being put off until the business case is done?
No, sorry to clarify, sorry, through the Chair, the blessing was in preparation for the the emergency works that has been undertaken right now, where we have the dropouts on the road. That work is happening, is what I'm saying, is in isolation of everything else going forward. So the immediate work's happening now. The other longer term work is being waited until the business cases come back and we know the full extent of work on that road.
Thank you.
Further questions? If not, would someone move the recommendations on page 26? Seconder? Thank you. I put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. The contrary carried. Emma. Transport agency update.
Right. Okay, so here we go. So what I want to start was just to further update you since our last visit with our board and executive members, was that we've now had some further changes to our organisational structure, and this has really been focused on making our structure simpler and also fixing some of the delegations and other areas that have been causing some challenges for us in making decisions as quickly as we'd like to. What we're now going to be doing over the next month is putting in place a more closely aligned regional structure that will enable us to ensure that everyone who works in a particular region is fully informed about that region and is working collaboratively with our partners. So by the end of this month, we'll be able to start introducing to the team here in Gisborne that regional structure. And we'll have an East Coast regional team, so it will be starting down in Central Hawke's Bay right up to East Cape. And we'll be looking across that whole network, and obviously we'll also be looking at the other State Highway 2 connection through to Opotiki, which we still see as critical to Gisborne, so we want to keep that very visible for our regional team here. I'm really excited about moving to this regional structure because I think it's much more about how we actually operate and the fact that everything that we do is actually delivered in a place. And we need our people to be informed and familiar about those places and know what the issues are for the local community so that we can partner with the council as effectively as we can. So that's still happening. We also, our board will be having some changes that are due to be announced in the next month or so, and then we'll have a new chief executive appointed by the end of the year. So that's some changes, but all of what's in train will continue. So I think that's really positive. It's certainly helping us do our jobs better, I think, by organising this way. So we'll keep you posted about that as we go. And part of that will also be more targeted regional information that we want to start making much more visible, have available on our website, and be talking about at our RTC meetings as a way to really focus us on what are the most important things to invest in around the region. One of the challenges that we talked about at that meeting was about the fact we still have fairly constrained funding environment that we're operating in, and that's going to continue to be the case for this NLTP and for the next NLTP. So I think this region has been very well organised in terms of having the ITPP in place and being able to take advantage of opportunities for funding from outside the NLTP. But we do need to be thinking in that medium term is we are working in a very constrained environment. Funding for this region has increased in terms of the ongoing maintenance and operation of the network, but there won't be a huge amount of headroom available across the fund for activities. So we're just going to have to be really strategic about ensuring that activities that you do want to proceed align well with government priorities and have really good evidence to support them. So that'll be something we'll continue to work with you and with the council officers to ensure that we get as much as we can for the available funding. We have, just to, actually, before I go on to the next one of the things that people have been talking quite a lot about is what's happening with state highways. So we have a particularly constrained state highway activity class, and if you look in our government policy statement, what you'll see is that that puts a 10-year funding context for our state highway activity class. And our role as a Crown entity is to give effect to government policy, and the board's responsibility is to take into account government policy, the funding ranges set by government, and also to make reasonable assumptions about the income for the National Land Transport Fund in order to determine what we can invest in. So, for example, if we look at fuel excise duty and road user charges, the board makes some assumptions that they will increase over time, either through increases in the rates or through increases in vehicle use. Now, if they start to look ahead into the future and consider that perhaps those increases may not be as certain, then they have to factor that into how much money will be available in the fund in future years. In the state highway activity class, the government policy statement sets out a funding trajectory that goes from a range of 1.2 to 1.5 billion in the last financial year to be in a range of 350 to 500 million in 10 years' time. So when you have a declining funding profile for an activity class, we have to be really careful about starting any new project, because those projects usually run over several years, if not 5 or 8 years for some of the really big projects. So the board can't enter into very large funding commitments in a declining funding profile. And so they're being very careful about starting new state highway projects. So Te Ahua Tūranga, the replacement road for the Manawatu Gorge, is the single largest new activity that has been approved by the board. And that the size and scale of that being over $500 million means there is very limited headroom, because out of that funding, we have out-year commitments for our PPPs, so we pay for those. So for example, Transmission Gully, once it's opening, will cost around 120 million a year to run. And that goes out for 25 years. So all those things need to be taken into account. So when you hear comments or questions or suppositions about what's happening in state highway activity class, that's what it is. It's absolutely clear. It's in the government policy statement. You can go and read it. It's page 27, I think, 37, something like that. So it's all there, and you can, using your own sort of fiscal judgment about how you plan and forecast, when you've got a known income stream, that's actually how our board has to operate. So it's just important context, and each of our activity classes has different types of constraints in it. And they also have different kind of profiles about what we expect to happen. So for example, walking and cycling is a small activity class, it's growing, but walking and cycling projects are very challenging projects. They tend to be difficult to consent. There's usually other services in the same area, so they can be quite expensive, and they're complex. And so they tend to take longer. Everyone has a bit of an optimism bias in the sector, I find, and they tend to take a bit longer. And so we get some delays, and things then roll into the next period as well. So, but our teams have good information about that and can help the teams understand what's going on and be familiar with that. So that was just a bit of an aside, but it's really important in terms of our operating environment, and we're happy to talk to you in more detail about that if you've got questions. Next gen LTP, So, so we're getting ready for the next round of government policy statement, regional land transport plans, and then the National Land Transport Program. And what we want to do with this is probably approach it from two different ends. One is Arataki, which is our long-term plan. So this is looking out to future years and thinking about out to about 2030, and what do we think needs to happen right across the country, across all aspects of the land transport system, and anticipating population change, economic industry growth and change, climate change, and other changes in use of the land transport system. And so we're saying to look at that, and it's a really important part of our stewardship role of thinking beyond the sort of 3-year timeframe of the government policy statement and the program and the 10-year funding trajectory, is thinking long term, what's happening in this environment and what is our advice, what's our view on it. So that's one aspect of what we'll be doing. We'll be coming out to talk to communities about that probably early next year. Then we're also looking at those funding commitments that exist within the current National Land Transport Fund and the activity classes, and giving you much more transparent information about what funding is already committed and where there's actually headroom in those activity classes and what's the scale of that relative to the demand right across the country. So trying to give everyone the same information to help ensure that you're making well-informed judgments about where to put your effort. Because what we, I think what we found with the last RLTP and some of the criticism we've had around that was it was a bit of a wish list. And then when it came into the agency to create the National Land Transport Program, there were a whole lot of things that didn't get over the line simply because there wasn't enough funding available to do it. So we don't want to be in a situation where we create a huge amount of demand and expectation that we're not able to meet. So again, we'll be talking to you about those investment signals early, and the Ministry of Transport's indicated that their timeline for doing the new government policy statement will be planning to release drafts much earlier than they did last time, because last time it was very squeezed by the election period. And so we should have much clearer investment signals earlier for that one, but we'll be working very closely with you on that. Speed management. So this is an area of significant priority for us, and we have a $1.4 billion program looking at ways that we will improve safety, and speed management is one part of that. And so we've got a whole range of projects right around the country. And what we're looking here is how we use the evidence that we have about the impact of speed in our deaths and serious injuries. And we know that speed is a factor, a causal factor in quite a significant proportion of crashes, but even when it isn't a contributing factor, it is a determining factor in the likelihood of deaths and serious injuries. So that's why we always focus on it. And we also have to balance up all the different ways that we help to create a safer transport environment. So part of that is about roads and roadsides, part of it's speed, part of it's vehicles, and part of it's driver behaviour. And we look at all of those things, and we also look at which ones are most likely to be cost effective when we implement them in particular locations. So on some roads, we may not have the ability to engineer them up to make them wider, put in medium barriers and so on. And so a speed change may be a more effective way of improving safety on that corridor. But we look at each of those situations. It's not one size fits all. There was some media coverage a month or so ago about some of the tools that we use when we look at safe speeds, and the MegaMaps tool is one of those. And what is really important to note here is that that's one input to our decision making. We also have to look at the roads and look at what is going to be safe and appropriate in that situation. It's not just done off a computer model. So I just want to reassure you about that. So we're starting off in terms of speed reviews. We're looking at the top 10% of the network where we have the most significant problem. So that means that we're starting in Auckland, the Waikato and Canterbury, because that's where we have our most significant deaths and serious injuries concentrated. And then we will keep on rolling out there. Now, specific to the Gisborne region, we've also, we've got actually very high demand for speed reviews around the country. So what we want to be able to do is look at all roads in a region as our preferred way of working. So we look at the state highway network and all the local roads, and we look at how to get safe and appropriate speeds that are consistently assessed and applied right through a whole district. And that means that if you go from a major state highway that's got all the new technologies and so on, it may be at 100, 110. As you go into the local roads, you gradually drop down the speed, and you don't do things like part of the network in Wellington has a state highway that's 80 kilometres an hour, and then you go onto a narrow, windy gravel road that's at 100 kilometres an hour. You can't travel at 100 kilometres an hour, and it's not intuitively logical to have it at that speed. So that's our preferred approach. However, we've also got a limited amount of capacity to do targeted speed reviews for particularly high-risk corridors or areas where communities are concerned. So we are going to be doing a speed review on State Highway 35. We're proposing that we will be looking to start consultation on that in November. And we will look firstly at the coastal communities to the north of Gisborne. So it's about the approximately 11k corridor that we've had a lot of concerns raised with us about, and we will start with that. And then we will progressively look at the rest of State Highway 35 as well. And we'll do any consultation on that. We'll link up with consultation that we will be doing on passing opportunities and on the resilience work on State Highway 35 as well. So that is a targeted speed review rather than the area wide. And that's something we'll do in partnership with the council and the local communities here. So just alongside speed reviews, we have our Safe Networks program, and this is our road deaths. And you can see that that is consistently going in the wrong direction, and this year is on track to continue that trend. And so we are looking very closely at every aspect of what we can do to contribute to changing those outcomes. And the Safe Networks program is a $1.4 billion program to look at state highways and local roads. And it takes a national approach and applies it into all of the regions there, and is looking at the roads and roadside speed management level crossings where we see a significant number of risks. And these are, we're doing a number of things in these programs to make them more efficient and cost effective to roll out in terms of identifying standard treatments that we can then become much more straightforward to consent and roll out across the network, and that's particularly around roads and roadsides, and where we look at, in some cases we can put median barriers in, but also side barriers, shoulder widening, new signage, wide median barriers, wide median lines. There's a whole range of things there, and so we're trying to, as much as possible, have standard treatments that we know we have the evidence for, and that we're able to apply them in a really cost-effective way because we've actually really investigated those and we're replicating them in multiple places around the country. So, as I said before, with speed, we start with the top 10% of the network. We see motor deaths and serious injuries, but we're also looking at the areas with high collective risk and with high deaths and serious injuries. So we're looking at the combination of factors that provide the evidence that these are areas where we have high risk. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're always areas that there are currently high DSIs, but they may be areas that have characteristics that we think would have the potential to contribute to deaths and serious injuries. So that is a big part of where we're focusing, and that will be rolled out nationally. Again, we will be doing that in partnership with local communities because that's a really important part of our engagement process. Now, you may have seen the Unsaid Drug Driving campaign. Now, this is slightly different to a number of our campaigns. It's not targeting behaviour change. This is targeting awareness raising, because what the evidence was showing us was that we were getting a lot of information about drug driving and drug driving being a contributing factor to crashes, and yet it's not something that people are talking about. It's not something that people were particularly raising as a factor. And we wanted to start the conversation because that then enables us to have a level of awareness that we can then start to talk about what changes in behaviour might start to look like. And so this has been incredibly effective. It's reached thousands and thousands of people. We had hundreds of stories, far more stories than we could possibly tell, and some really, really tragic stories and situations and experiences that people, not only people who died, drivers who had survived, family members, first responders, a huge range of stories. And it is something that we'll continue to think about how we target for behaviour change in the future. Moving into the program in the local region, firstly on the State Highway HPMV structural work, we have gone through the process there in terms of being able to open the highway to HPMV, and we know there's still some more work required at the Opotiki end of the route, and so we're carrying on with that work. We are looking at the State Highway 35 resilience work, and again doing that in partnership with GDC so that any community engagement is well linked in. And the Mukumuka realignment, we are working with the Hapu, and then that is still going through its consenting process. In the 5-year program, we have the detailed business cases underway for both Waikari Gorge and the passing opportunities, and so that's making progress and starting to get those passing opportunities identified. As we've learned in previous investigations of passing opportunities, somewhat more complex than they sometimes appear in terms of getting a safe stretch of road, and that's also geologically, the geology is sound, and that we can then get landowner agreement and so on. And we will be working again in connection with the other projects around how we engage with iwi and the communities before we start working there. And we'll, part of that for PGF criteria, we need to look at how that will support economic growth and benefits to the region. And a couple of construction updates. So the temporary bollard's been removed on the Gladstone Bridge. We know there's some issues there with some bulging bridge joints that are creating some challenges. So working through how we can get those improved, and we're still looking at the handrail options for that side of the bridge. And Motu Bridge, we're starting the southern end, finalising all of that work in this construction season. And finally, maintenance. So the Northern District Outcomes contract, we're in negotiation, and we have a really significant program of work on both 2 and 35 over summer. So just giving you an indication of that, 91 lane kilometres of resealing, and that'll be doing around 13% of the total state highway network, and 11 lane kilometres of rehab, which is the full rebuild of those sections of highway. So that's really important. If you had noticed in the tables on the expenditure as part of the annual plan, we've been spending over what was previously budgeted because of the need to get the Northern network back up to the levels of service that we expect of it. And so this will really continue to ensure that we've got that in good shape through the summer season. So that's me.
Yeah, thank you for that, Emma. Very comprehensive. My question is, when it comes to setting local road speed limits, is there going to be a process where local authorities, particularly ours, have more of a say in the speed of the time of when they are set as well? Because there's quite a few roads around the place that there's the community are concerned with speed limits. We've got quite a bit of growth happening out in area out past Cameron Road, so forth, and there's been a lot of requests for, it's 100k, and it's a built up area there, coming from a 50k into 80, and then it goes to 100 right on a roundabout, and then around the Henson Road area in particular. So yeah, but it comes to us quite regularly that local community people wanting to look at road speed limits and reduction of them, and then the lengthy process that you have to go through to achieve it. So is there a futuristic look at localism back in the speed limits?
Yeah, so if I look at some of the experience that we've had in some of my other regions where local councils have undertaken a full review of all of their local roads, and they've done that through, so rather than, so there are a range of ways you can do this. So you can bite off one small corridor and say, we want to make some changes to this corridor and it's a priority for safety concerns or development issues or other things, and work through it on that basis. The other way is to do a whole of region review. So Kapiti Coast District Council's just done that, Horowhenua District Council's just in the process of finalising theirs. And that's a bigger piece of work because it obviously means you go out and you're assessing every single road and engaging with the community and the residents around those changes. But then you're very much looking at doing that in a way that's consistent. So as you go from large arterial roads down to smaller roads, they have a consistent speed limit, and the look and feel of the roads is consistent with that, so it's intuitive for drivers. It makes the life of our friends over here in enforcement much simpler. So that whole of region approach is quite a big undertaking, and in terms of our ability to engage and support that, it's very limited. So we're prioritising those full regional ones according to where we see the most risk and therefore the most to be gained from doing that. There's nothing to stop you going ahead and starting those processes yourselves with the council in terms of the resourcing there, but our ability to do that alongside you is constrained in terms of how much resource we've got available for speed reviews. There's a limited number of experts in the business across the whole country. So that's a matter of discussing with us and talking through Is there a small corridor that's causing you significant concerns that something could be done about? It's relatively straightforward versus the whole of region process.
So, supplementary there, so timeframes, I mean, in the past, whenever there's been proposals put, you're looking at kind of a 2-year window before it gets approved. And, a lot of the time it's just unacceptable for, communities when they've got really serious issues. I mean, a death does speed up the process, but unfortunately, preventing a death doesn't, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
I'm not involved in the detailed assessment of these, but generally speaking, if you're following the guidelines and providing advice that's consistent with the guidelines, it's relatively straightforward to proceed. And in the case of Kapiti Coast, I'm not sure how long the whole process took, but certainly the approvals was pretty straightforward.
Thank you very much. Mine relates similarly to that. And on behalf of the residents of Okatū, I'd have to express disappointment that this process is so long-winded. And I'm sure I didn't imagine that we were told probably 2 LTP regional transport meetings ago that there would be an announcement in September. I'm sure you told us that, with respect to speed. And we had families in here with a petition last summer. If you're now suggesting that it's going to begin in November, there will be no change to the speed limit on that portion of the state highway before this summer. And it would appear, it makes it seem to our community that we are not listening to them. And it does seem procrastination, if I can be so bold, and delays on the part of NZTA that don't highlight priorities that communities have asked for. And it would seem that that could be picked up in isolation to the others. And as for your comment about, there might be a delay, a lower speed limit. All of our rural roads are 80 unless there's something fell away and there's a temporary speed limit on it. So we're perfectly used to driving on our rural roads with a higher speed limit. That's not our problem. It's responding to our community. So I'd love to hear what you've got to say about what we can expect for those residents of Wainui, Okatū. It was Makarori and Turihau, and there was some understanding given that it might, review of that speed limit might follow right along that area of the beach.
So that's what we're looking at, is the review, to start the speed review of State Highway 35 on the stretch that it's around about 11 k's north of Gisborne.
But it was, I'm quite sure that you told us that it was going to be an announcement in September. Now you're telling us it's going to start a review in November.
I've not been in a position to announce this decision because this decision wasn't made until recently. We have been working towards this decision. There are quite significant resourcing constraints in terms of what we can do, and we have worked really hard to bring this one forward outside of the agreed program that we already had announced by government. So that's what we are announcing now, because we have a decision and we're able to announce that we can go ahead and plan to implement that with the community and work in partnership with the council. That is what we have been working for.
Thank you.
Just to follow on from that, thank you, Ms. Emma, for your thorough report back to us. But how does the government prioritise region? Because what Councillor Seaman was allaying to is that we are often hit up by our public, our constituents, our ratepayers, etc., around the region getting what it feels is its right, especially with state highways, of course. I travelled State Highway 35 home last night and I see the challenges of it. So, you know, when we think about our region, of course, we're here, we're invested in it. And so how do they prioritise the region in the space of decision makers, but also with the speed reviews? Are they consistent with the type of road it is? Because we know our roads are quite challenged because they're shifting, they're coastal, the geology is not the greatest. And if you don't drive them regularly, if you're a new driver and if your vehicle isn't up to scratch and etc., those are a number of challenges that add to that. So our regions like ours keep feeling like we have to keep chanting, I suppose, in a sense to government. And then again, we are local who know our road networks, the challenges of them. Do many of those making these decisions drive those roads or get an understanding from a space? So, but those were a couple of the questions I had.
So in terms of the amount of money we spend per kilometre of network, Gisborne's in the top 5 in the country. So we know this network costs more to maintain because we're spending more on it. So that's in terms of the state highway network. So, you know, I think it is important to recognise that we are, in terms of providing a level of service in this region, it is an expensive network to maintain, and we are spending that money. So you're in the top 5, not necessarily always the best stat, but that is there. In terms of what we are required to do, we are required to set priorities nationally. Now, that means that where we have greater concentrations of population and greater evidence of the issues that we're required to prioritise, we have to prioritise those areas. So that's where, for example, the current speed management priorities are directed to those top 10% areas. And that is what we're required to do. But we have maintained the ability, as we've done with State Highway 35, to target some specific areas to respond to local communities or evidence of particular corridors that are having real problems. So we do a bit of both in terms of we absolutely have to deliver to the national priorities, but we also have to recognise that there are going to be parts of our network or our transport system that will warrant particular attention outside those areas. And then we also do obviously work regionally, because then we invest across every region in terms of both the local road and state highways. So we are looking at investment in each region and taking into account the evidence that we get from our council partners and also from our local contractors about what's happening in the network and where the most urgent needs are in terms of both maintenance and replacement of assets.
Thank you for that. So supplementary, is it that we've got increasing expensive costs to maintain our network, obviously because of the growth of an industry that has had a huge impact in this region in the last few decades. So are we in a space to constantly keep the maintenance and the framework, because we've still got more logs on stream, we've still got this industry heavily involved in this region. So are we projecting out that we will have enough coverage, you know, in the finances to keep maintaining? Because as you said, we're in the top 5. We're a very expensive region to maintain. That's not going to get any less costly, is it?
And well, that's one of the reasons for the that long-term strategy that I mentioned earlier, Arataki. So, and as part of that, we are identifying some of the drivers of changes in the network use and drivers and change of costs and so on. So, for example, with the Billion Trees program, you're essentially seeing about 500 million additional trees being planted over the next 10 years. And with carbon pricing, that's going to mean that pretty much all those forests, if they're not permanent forests, will be replanted every time, because it won't be economic to harvest and not replant. So that, for example, is a driver across many, many parts of the country. It's certainly evident here, but it's evident in every region that I operate in. It's pretty significant, and so that's a national issue. And you know, I think out of Arataki, we will be wanting to have a more strategic conversation with the industry and with local government about what is the long-term plan for sustainable harvest, both in terms of environmental expectations and in terms of the managing the cost impact on the roading infrastructure. And there's also access to ports or other processing that's important for that. So it is definitely an issue. We are very interested in it, and we're talking to the forestry industry about it as well as MPI, Te Rūrākau, Local Government New Zealand, and all the other parties.
Okay, thank you. I just had one last question. I just had one last question. I did notice on the Gladstone Road Bridge and what you posted up there, painting the other side wasn't noted. Is that still a consideration to paint the other side of that bridge to match? Or is that just not, it's a question posed to us often. Will it be matching even in just colour? Is that something that can be, I remember we talked of it, so is that just not something NZTA are prepared to do?
Well, it's something we can certainly look at. It's not something that we've considered at the moment. So we removed the safe hit posts and we painted the deck, but we didn't have the funding allocated to paint the bridge itself. It's a heritage bridge. You can't just go and put any colour on. You have to get Heritage New Zealand consent to change the look and feel of it. So we do need to engage with them on that process.
So should council engage in that process too regarding that heritage talk, or is that something?
So we can do it as part of the discussion with the handrail. It won't happen overnight.
We know that.
No, it's not really high priority.
But it will happen this decade.
Any further questions? Emma? Someone move recommendations on page 31.
Happy to.
Seconder. Set to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a general question around NZTA's role on the state highway, and it probably does relate to now, and I'm sure Emma will tell us if she doesn't want to answer it right now. But it relates to vehicles that are abandoned on the state highway and end up being there for more than 2 weeks. So they then become smashed, and broken glass and debris and probably oil and petrol and all the other things run from the car into the water table. Now, there's an announcement being made today around what everyone else is going to have to do around fresh, clean water and rivers and waterways. So I would like NZTA to tell us why it's okay for them to leave vehicles on the side of the road, allow them to be smashed, when they have senior officers, just as we do, travelling up and down the roads each day, and we just leave them there. There's a case in point which I flagged today through services. It's been on State Highway 35 near the Mangakuri stream for 3 weeks. And I was leaving it to see how long it was going to take an officer or somebody else to do something about it. Now it's smashed, broken glass everywhere, and probably other debris. So could we have some expansion on just what NZTA's policy is on the state highway? We know what ours is on local roads, but it is actually now allowing contaminants to get into waterways. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Emma.
Thank you, Emma. So generally we would move vehicles if they're a safety hazard. Obviously what we can't control is where people leave their vehicles and then expect the taxpayer to pick up the relocation cost. Matt will attest to the volume that we have in Hawke's Bay has gone through the roof recently with vehicles just being abandoned. Obviously if they're a safety hazard to passing motorists, we'll move them, but we can't just relocate vehicles because there have been instances where we've moved vehicles and someone's turned up and found their vehicle gone, and there's been some questions about where it's gone. We thought it's been abandoned, but it's actually just been left. They've run out of petrol or whatever it is, and they've come back. So if it's a safety hazard, we'll move it. I have got the one, I've asked Downers to relocate the one that's broken at the moment, up on 35. It'd be great if people just didn't abandon their vehicles on the side of the road. That would be a good start. Because obviously there's a considerable taxpayer dollar involved in moving these, and the money we get back from scrapping them does not cover the costs of relocating them. That would be fair enough, Matt?
As of this morning, between Victoria here, there's 4 vehicles on the side of the road. State Highway 35. I don't want to put a damper on things.
So it would, I wonder if there's an opportunity here because these are local ratepayers, but they're an opportunity for both parties to work together to actually talk to the community about, if you abandon them on the side of the road, the cost is going to come back to them one way or another. So is there a better way of working with communities to get rid of these vehicles? Because at the moment it is costing us a lot of money, and it will cost you guys a lot of money on the local road network as well. And it hell of an environmental impact. Yep.
Thank you for that. ask you to go to page 32, and I'll introduce Donna MacArthur, who's the Journeys Operation Manager. Council, is it? Yes, well, welcome.
Hello, everybody. So the Journeys team has put together a brief high-level overview for you for today. So this is the new structure that we now have in place with the disestablishment of Tairāwhiti Roads with the Journeys team. And Dave Hadfield is the infrastructure manager, and I'm the acting operations manager. So this is my first meeting. So. So we just thought we'd do a high-level overview on the emergency works program, the improved network mobility, PGF work and capital works program for you. So the emergency works funding we have the July 2017 funding available, the Debbie and Cook 2017, the June 2018 flood event and the September 2018 flood event also. That's the funding streams that we have available for us to achieve some work this year. So with the July 2017 Debbie and Cook event, this is the final year of the funding stream from NZTA for this event, and the majority of the funding, as mentioned earlier, will be utilised for the Escape work that's been associated from those events. The Journeys team, along with Bill, we attended a blessing at East Cape earlier this month, and I think that was a really successful blessing and opportunity to meet with the community and listen to their concerns. Meredith came along as well, and for me personally, it was a very enjoyable event, getting to meet the community and actually seeing the issues associated with it. The Queen's Birthday event. We have $10 million this financial year that we've actually committed to carry out the physical work, the site inspections and the designs. We're working incredibly closely with the contractors associated with that. This financial year, we've instigated a fortnightly flood meeting that we hold with the contractors. So not only are we advising them these are our funding values, we also have an expectation that they're accountable for that expenditure, and they provide us by location, by spend, and we're tracking that fortnightly. And very pleased to say that at the moment it's been very successful. The September 2018 flood event, we have $900,000 that's been committed this financial year to carry out the physical works, site inspections and designs associated with that emergency work event also. It's part of the flood meeting that we hold fortnightly with the contractors. So in that meeting, we discuss the June 2018 event and the September 2018 event. We keep the funding streams very separate to ensure there's no cross-pollination of funding. And again, it's proving to be very successful at this point in time. The improved network. So we've initiated smart cards on all the buses, the bus services. So it wasn't a development stage, and it's just starting to roll out now to the community. So initially it was just with the schools, and it is still in development in the early stages, to be fair, but we are working quite closely with Go Buses to determine accessibility for the public. And I'm not sure if you're aware or not, Paper Plus, as an example, are now an outlet for selling the smart cards to the community to make it easier for the community to get access to the smart cards, as well as through the high schools for the students as well. We've increased routes through Kaiti, and we've also increased a bus route to the retirement villages, which we have actually had some really lovely RFS compliments associated with that. And I'll hand over to Dave.
Thank you, Donna. So Provincial Growth Fund, that's very topical at the moment. We've got auditors looking over all our information files this week, and they're targeting the Provincial Growth Fund. They want to make sure it's spent in the right categories, right places. It's put into our RAM database. And it's the other components that we're trying to make sure, you know, the social components, you know, in terms of success of that, you know, in terms of employment, of social opportunities, all that has to be reported, which is new for us in terms of engineering, because we usually it's straight out price and quite hard, I kind of call it outcomes. It's more the social outcomes that we're having to adjust to, and it's going to have to come through in our future procurement documents, and including environmental and cultural issues that have to be in there, and local buying. So it's quite a change in direction in terms of procurement. So it's all government too. So that's a challenge for our team. At the moment, you're saying last year there was a big surge of projects, and now this year we're starting to. The Provincial Growth Fund was just initial boost to get things going, and that we've carried most of that out last year. This year is just the completion of that, but the main focus will be the business cases, which I've talked to before. So there's still a little bit of culvert repairs, and we can give you more details of that in the SEC committee. Okay, I've talked about the business case. There's one that wasn't the PGF related. It's just a tidy up of the walking and cycling component. There's which will be starting to lead into the next NLTP. The 0.2, 200,000, that's an upper limit, but there's been a big discussion that we need to, now that Rutini Road has been put on hold, what we do next and as a community. Okay, so there's a discussion when we did the original planning documents. I mean, we never realised that a harbour would be such a big development area when we put that through. So there's some discussions, you know, what should we do with Wainui stage 2, you know, where should it go? And it's giving that option there, and it's also giving the option about the Tarahiru and bringing that back up to the council so we can get some decisions, good decisions leading into next NLTP. So that'll tie. We've got some bridges that are underway. 3 of them, two are physical works. The Mangapora 1 and 2. Mangapora was basically started last year, and we're hoping to. It's open for light traffic at the moment, and still at least another month away till it's completed. And now number 2 has been tendered. Okay. So CR Taylor have got Wiggins Bridge and Mangapora 2, and we've got one more last bridge that's out for tender. It goes out for tender next week, and that was a bridge which Earnsville won. They had a previous deputation here, so that's going out. We'll see what the prices come back at, but at least that process is underway. A lot of the stuff isn't too sexy, but it's important. It's retaining walls. There's a lot of work that's going at the moment. Safety improvements. Back on Wynn Road, you'll see there's some safety improvements that have gone up there. That's finished. A little bit of site benching and retaining wall contracts. Some of them were let late last year, and they're just coming into this financial year for completion. So that's district-wide. Oops. I only had one last one, and it was just about the LED streetlights, and there's a lot of other projects that are underway. So I'll take any questions.
No, thank you for all your work that you do. But one of the key questions we often are asked as well is within our plans and all plans, climate change impacts. So when we look at some of the workmanship that's having to be done in the coastal zones, obviously the mitigation of rising oceans, etc., are those rocks that we see being put to provide resilience and strength into coastal roads. So throughout all our plans, is that a feature on its own right, climate change, or is it just as it happens in the spaces you're working in?
Yeah, there's certain parts of the network which are right up front, like Tukumara Bay Seaboard, and that's why it's so important the spatial plan, and we have to start looking at that and what are we going to do with some of these coastal areas. Tukumara Bay is fortunate, the road's on that side, and so we've got to protect that road. It's just what are we going to do in the future? There's other networks, which East Cape Road is another one. where potentially, could be coming up with some big numbers, and it's just, it's going to have to be, somehow we're going to have to find some investment. But that's something that we've got in the spatial plan and about climate change, and just what we have to, because as you're saying, a lot of our rainfall is becoming more intense as well, in terms of some of the emergency things. So, no, it's good.
And just my last question, cycleways, walkways, you mentioned the Rutini Road is on hold. I mean, and I see this is going to be a challenge no matter how we look at our region, because we know we need to get a portion of our students, especially from one side of town to the other. So, and I'm trying to think of other avenues, obviously, for that cycleway to go. So there's a lot more conversations for options to be considered. Has there been any kind of current considerations for other options, or we're just putting Rutini Road on hold until we can absolutely consider it as best option?
Yes. So that business case with Rutini Road, there was a discussion there was really no consultation here. And so that's why it was put on hold, because the initial feedback and pushback from the community was quite strong. So project team came back, and then it was actually said, let's close that bit off, finish that bit with what we're going to do with Rutini Road, come back, and then there were other options that should have been discussed. Bring it all to the table, let the council make a decision.
Yeah, I was just kind of touching on that actually too, because reading between your lines, when you were mentioning about, the Rutini, well, you weren't mentioning Rutini Road, but the cycle walkway and the expense of the inner harbour and the focus of the inner harbour, and it's kind of like the obvious is to be almost not pursuing the Rutini Road, but possibly diverting down Wainui Road and through the inner harbour, and then continuing on the Tarahiru cycleway for the future to access the schools. So is that an option that you've been looking at?
Through the chair, I'm going to answer that before Dave says anything. So through the chair, I'm answering because I'm the sponsor of cycleways that we're doing. So cycleways sit with me. So we have a range of options that are being developed up. So there's 5 different options that will be coming back as alternatives to Rutini Road. There's a range of issues with that cycleway. Consultation, as Dave talked about, we also have a major stormwater upgrade that's going to take us 2 years that needs to go through there, which the committee may not be aware of. But what we're doing is working with NZTA, so we're partnering on it. We're both authored the study to look at seeing which are the best routes to finish the Wainui Road cycleway to build on the success there, but then also look at other ways to move from one side of the city to the other. We need to develop up those options to then bring back for public consultation. There's a range of different options that we'll be presenting.
That indeed was a timely intervention, David. Any further questions? If not, would someone move the recommendations on page 31? Seconder? Put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. Right, Donna, this is you again? No. No. No, sorry. Diana. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I've been instructed to introduce Diane Makarangi to you committee, and I'm just doing that. Note her title is Road Safety Educator, so treat her with a bit of kindness.
Oh, kia ora everyone. Hey, just wanted to take this opportunity to give you a little a brief around some of the road safety activities that we've been running over the last few months. So basically, if you have any questions, fire them away. Dave and I will answer them.
Through the chair, I'd like to ask a question. I've noticed of late, probably in the last couple of months, you're talking about speed and safety, the speed of young drivers going into roundabouts. And I don't know if it's the increase of our traffic that we're experiencing, but I've noticed, like I say, there's a lot of people coming into our roundabouts far too fast. And it just
Yeah,
makes you
I'm
wonder.
going to hand that over.
But it's a safety thing.
Yeah, it is a safety matter. I would think it's a little bit to do with volume, but also to do with perhaps the speed review and how many crashes we're having at roundabouts. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you of a significant increase in crashes at roundabouts, but it may be a perception rather than an actuality sometimes, because feasibly, the speed limit through a roundabout is the speed limit of the road. So arguably you can maintain that speed and not be in breach of the speed limit. From a perception point of view though, most of us tend to slow down when there's a deviation in the road and perhaps there's some give way rules that are perhaps not being abided by. But generally speaking, we do tend to focus our attention on the priority actions that contribute to crashes and injuries. So those are restraints, impairment, distraction and speed. So speed being one of them. And if we felt that one of the roundabouts was facilitating too much speed around it, then we would consult with the local road controlling authority to decide whether we couldn't design a feature that would intuitively slow vehicles down.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for all the work that you are doing in this region. I certainly appreciate it that you are working harder to prevent, obviously, but we've seen a graph stating a rise. And I was wondering, what do you think is actually working well? You had a wonderful program up the coast with a person who survived because he wore a seatbelt. And so I'm trying to figure out what messaging is working best for our young drivers, particularly, obviously, who feature quite highly in the stats, but also is it time to just change some of our license, the learning space of the license program or licensing drivers, because I don't know if it's been the same for a long time, but defensive driving costs more, but certainly I sense there is a chance now to consider all the options around how we teach young people to drive in that space. But for now, what's working?
So obviously you've heard of the Whakamanahia program that's for recidivist drink drivers. So we think that's awesome. It's a good program and it's showing some success at the moment. We've had 280 people go through that program and only 4 have reoffended, and one person has reoffended twice. So out of those people, and these are people that have been caught 18 times. Yeah, up to 18 times. There's a few of them that attend this course. So that's one of our successes, I think, and we're introducing that into Boys High in November. And why we're doing that is because our target is Māori males. And yeah, so we're going to see how that program runs through the schools. But obviously when it comes to driving, we have Ngā Arapai. We've just introduced another service provider to the coast, which is really good. So Taira Whiti Reap, we've jumped on board with them. We've also looked at another plan of attack with our local service providers. We're looking at being able to service more people. So up to 160 to 180 people we want to get through this year. And also we want to go out western rural. So that's some of the things that we're doing. And in terms of how we can change the behavior of licensing, that's one way, by going through that system where mentoring is right up there, where police come in and do mentoring as well. Yeah, so I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Well, it sounds like this working
Yeah.
like you said is, thank you so much, because obviously seeing our statistics the way they are, we know it's human that we need to get people on board with. One of the issues for a lot of our young drivers is their car, and a lot of them aren't, well, they're relatively cheap to purchase, of course, but I was listening to the radio today that stated about 18,000 cars are not fit for purpose on our roads.
Yeah, that's
and so
right.
How can we engage that space to ensure a young person isn't purchasing a car that actually isn't that? So it passes a warrant, but we're still seeing a lot of young people drive cars that are particularly safe. Or, you know, again, maintenance costs, all those factors, it depends on where the income streams come from. So is that an area that we?
Yeah, so I think it's 50,000 cars have been recorded, Matt. If I just thought the 50,000 cars have been recorded because they weren't fit for purpose, no warrant of fitness, or?
Now, generally speaking, I know that that we impound a number of cars every month, and more often than that, those are for the drivers' misdemeanors, so they're insufficiently registered or they're disqualified or so on. And about a third of all the cars we impound are just scrapped because they are, well, it's just not worth coming to collect, and they won't have a registration, they won't have a warrant, and often they're not registered to anybody either. So like you say, it's quite cheap to get hold of those vehicles, and there's an awful lot of them out there, and they are a big concern. So under the next 10 years cycle of government policy, that will be one of the focuses, is to increase the safety features that are around the general fleet that is on the road. And downside of that, of course, is it increases the costs for those people who are already challenged to get onto the motoring. So that's something for you to consider as a regional transport committee and as a Gisborne District Council, is how you're going to support those people to safely getting to the motoring, because of your geography. You really need them to travel for work. Otherwise, you're going to have significant problems. So generally speaking, the driving license program works for most. But as we know, there is a small proportion of people that it does not work for, and we must have a safety net for those. You need to have one. And Narapai is a very successful one here. Community education is way more effective than community punishment. So our, again, general deterrent theory is most of us only ever get one ticket in our lives. That's enough for us. We're out. Thanks very much. But there are, again, that small proportion of people that either can't or don't learn from that, and those are the ones you've got to get alongside. So that's what we do with Road Safe, is try and get alongside those people.
On that note, we are looking at the opportunity to set up a warrant of fitness service up on the coast again. So that is definitely in the pipelines, and looking to do that before Christmas.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I'm not sure who's going to answer that question. With respect to Te Whorao, which has huge congestion at pickup time after school, and not that anyone is misobeying the law, it's actually that there is not enough room for the number of cars that need to be there. And I've followed them because I need to go there quite often to a nearby residence. And the road is really congested as they go down to the small roundabout to turn around. They're likely to block traffic for some time. So is there a wider plan about what can be done with some more of the grass verges which have been taken up and used as parking? And what is council and police and road safety doing about, and working with Te Whorao, obviously, as to what an improved outcome will be?
Can I go first? Yeah, we're giving it to the council to look at.
Is there any plan?
So through the chair, there's the school priority program. Te Whorao is on the list to have some improvements, but it is also looking at the drains that are there that would need to be covered and the cost of those, and then working with the residents in the school as to what the right outcome is. So Te Whorao does have some congestion issues. It is a narrow street through there, but it's not a simple fix.
It's not mentioned in the list here. Otherwise, if it was on the list, I wouldn't have needed to ask.
This isn't one of the high priority lists. Remember, we went through the school ranking of every school in the district, and there are other higher priority schools in Te Whorao.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you for that report. That kind of brings us to the end of the meeting, and I think it's time for acknowledgements and tributes and thanks. Before I close the meeting, I need to acknowledge firstly our retiring councillor Graham Thompson. He's also the chairman of Assets Structure. He's been of great value. He's been here for quite a while. He's probably sick of us, that's why he's going, but never mind. Thank you, Graham, for all the time you've been with us. Our staff, in particular. We've been so lucky that both Davids over there, they've copped a fair bit of flack during the last 3 years, and yet pretty resilient and come up with the answers. Some of us have gone from and signed off the start of Tairāwhiti roads and then signed off Tairāwhiti roads. And while it has been a real journey for the staff, they've certainly looked after us. I need to also acknowledge the members of our committee. I know not all of them are here today. I hope there's a little bit, we've got a mayoral aspirant sitting amongst us. I hope there's a little bit of consistency in the selection of this committee too next time round, because you learn valuable things about the regional land transport requirements in terms of the plans. And while we have copped, or I have copped some criticism in the past, I think it's a very valued committee within council. Who have I forgotten? No one, I hope. Pat, of course, has kept us on our toes. So has Larry. And good on them. That's what it's all about. Press, thank you very much for what you've done for us. Good or bad reporting, but it's still there.
We've got one late item, Mr.
Right, where you go, Pat.
That I did flag it 10 days ago, and I had flagged it with NZTA. It's arisen around the proliferation of the safety barriers on south of Tolaga Bay, Uawa, and it's been brought up at a community meeting in Tolaga. And some of the community are not happy that the barriers seem to be extremely close to the tar seal. And in particular, one gentleman, and I've written this, half of you will have not committee, but hierarchy have seen this. They're concerned that the barrier will in fact deflect a vehicle back into the road carriageway and potentially into the path of a logging truck or into the path of a school bus. That's exactly as it has been described at a community meeting, and I've been asked to bring it up here. So I need NZTA to clarify for our community what the benefits are. There's a view that where there is no absolute need for the barriers, a car could run off the side of the road safely, and there is no runoff. It particularly relates, for those that are familiar with the road, around the flat on the the north end of the Tolaga Bay Gorge around the Murphys, where the world has sprouted these barriers where there's never been a problem before. So I'm really grateful if you could elaborate so that we can have the press tell our public what these barriers are meant to, and whether or not this perception that they will deflect the car into the path of another vehicle is in fact correct.
So the barriers are malleable, so they are not rigid structures. So if you hit them, they will absorb the energy of the vehicle hitting them. Obviously, we wouldn't put anything in place that would deflect someone into the other side of the road. The other thing to think about is, whilst it might appear that there was no problem there before, a lot of the accidents we've had where vehicles have clipped the grass verge and overcorrected and steered into the front of oncoming vehicles on the other side of the road. So this you'll hit the guardrail and it'll absorb the energy of the vehicle. Now, my understanding is the guardrail is 1.5 meters outside of the sealed shoulder. It might be 1 meter, but wherever possible, we'll put it 1.5 meters outside the sealed shoulder. And often what you don't see are culvert head walls and drops behind, and that's what we're trying to protect motorists from. So they generally wouldn't put them in unless there was a roadside hazard that we need to protect.
Thank you. Obviously we have to accept your explanation, and I don't think there's a number of places where they're not meeting.
Okay.
That's enough. I want to finish on a positive note. Yes. Yes. See what you've started, Pat?
No, I sort of intended to ask the question or just raise the issue earlier on, and yeah, and it started off like going back a couple of years ago. There was a tragic accident over in Wakatani where some road workers were hit by a vehicle, and I remember the judge's comments were that you had to obey the road slow down signs, but he also made a comment that the people undertaking the road works had to be careful not to leave cones out where there was no action because people became blasé to them, and he was very specific about that at the time, and people became sort of immune to them and didn't adhere the warning. And we've just had some projects done out just past the Weybridge heading towards Manatuki, and going back over the last 6 months, there was some road dug up and strengthened. Then shortly after that, by the little stream, the Tuna stream or whatever it is, there was a widening done. And then shortly after that, there was a crash barrier put in. And then shortly after that, there was some cleaning up down on the side of the road towards a fence, so very little. And now they're doing a big culvert there. And we've virtually had these road signs, slow down road signs and cones out for 6 months on that stretch of road, on and off, just doing little bits. And I would ask seriously that we consider when we've got these sorts of projects going, that the project managers try and integrate their work so that it happens under one watch as much as they can, rather than, cones in one day, and then some of them, the cones are actually left out between jobs and you sort of wonder what's going on here. And exactly, I'm reminded of the judge at Wakapani saying, and you'll notice that while the cones are left out and there's nobody working, nobody's thrown down. They're all carrying on. And so I think we've got to be very careful, take note of the warning that we've been given, and try and get our project managers to integrate the work in the tightest time frame so that it causes less inconvenience to people and people don't become immune to those slowdown signs.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. I was going to close on a positive note, and I still am.
Oh, that was
And
positive.
acknowledge Emma and the Transport Agency staff, the police who come and keep us on our toes, report regularly. But in terms of the Transport Agency, let's face it, the district would not have the roads in the condition they're in now, and I'm not saying there's not a hell of a lot wrong with them, but they can be better, if we didn't have the Transport Agency on board and that government funding. On that note, meeting closed.